This video is sponsored by Squarespace. If you need a domain, a website or online store, make it with Squarespace. So here are 6 things you should be doing when editing photos. And it's not that you'll want to use all of these every time, but there are some processes here that you may be overlooking. Obviously, a lot of this would be better to do in camera, but you don't always have that luxury at the time. Number 1, always consider cropping your images. Sometimes I think we can get into a bit of a preciousness mindset with our equipment. Maybe we paid out for a full frame camera and we want to use that whole full frame and we don't want to crop it down to a third of what we paid for, but you have no obligation to respect the sensor size or the aspect ratio. Photography is about telling stories with images, so do whatever you need to make that image concise and resonant. The content of your image is more important than the technical quality of it. Now you may be thinking, I know how to crop my shots, that's not a tip I need, but do you really consider it often enough? Take a look at how severely cropped these photos by Arnold Newman are, but consider how much impact they would lose if he decided that he wanted to get the maximum quality out of his shots by using more of the medium format negative. Take a look at how the cropping of this shot by Elliot Erwitt completely transforms this image. So this is a good example of an image I would crop. This is a photo of a groom giving a speech, but he's surrounded by quite a lot of space there. So what I would do was I would probably put him in the rule of thirds, crop down to about here, straighten those lines up as well. I'm just going to put him around about there so his eye is on the top left third, and that makes, for me, a much better image. He's much more prominent in the frame and all that stuff that is irrelevant has gone out of the shot. This isn't a shot I probably would crop because I quite like her small in the frame here, but if I was going to crop it, I would probably again use the rule of thirds. And one thing to note here is that when we have a subject that we're placing towards one side of a shot, it's generally a good idea to have them looking into the shot. In this sense, we can connect with the subject a little bit more because we're kind of seeing the space that they're looking into. If we were to do it the other way round, this is normally what you don't do, but this can be used to show an element of mystery, like she's looking out of the frame, we don't really know what she's looking at, so it adds a different feeling to the photograph. One thing to be aware of in Lightroom when you use the crop tool, if you press O, you can cycle through different overlays that can help you determine where to crop. And if you hold Shift and O, then that will then take you into further variants upon each one. One thing to note here is that experimenting with cropping your shots in post-production will help you learn to frame shots better at the time of taking them. Secondly, before you do any other editing, take your time to get your white balance absolutely as you want it. Your white balance is key to both how your photo looks and how it feels. Adjusting the white balance can completely change the meaning of a photograph. When we think of white balance, we normally think of correcting the image, getting the colour temperature to match the true-to-life look of the scene. But white balance can also be used creatively to dramatically alter the feeling of your shot. A warm white balance can give your image a peaceful, content or calm feeling, like an evocative memory of a summer afternoon. It can trigger feelings of trust, joy and optimism. A cooler, greeny-blue white balance can give your image maybe an uneasy or a sad feeling. While we may associate a warm white balance with the natural warmth of the sun or a cosy fireside, a cooler one may remind us of scenarios like fluorescent strip lighting in a hospital, or the eerie cast of moonlight, or blue hour, that time after golden hour when the sun has set and we've passed that transition from day into night. It's always worth having a good play around with the white balance just to see how different your image could look. Now this is a good shot to explain what I mean about white balance. This shot, as we can see, has a sort of greeny tint to it. A good place to take a white balance reading from is the white of someone's eye. So if we pick the eyedropper here and we click on the white of her eye, then we get a very accurate white balance. But what I want for this shot is not an accurate white balance. I want it to feel very warm. I want it to feel that kind of golden hour light. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the temperature slider somewhere up around, maybe a bit less than that, somewhere around there. So you really get that warm, golden hour, evening glow feel to the shot. If you can't get the exact feel you're looking for with the white balance, you can also go to the split toning. So if I pull these up, now I've got that warmth again, just through tinting the highlights to a kind of yellowy green and tinting the shadows to a kind of orangey colour. Number 3, don't be afraid to selectively alter the exposure of different areas of your image in order to highlight specific elements. So this shot's also a good shot to show you how I would use dodging and burning. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the radial filter here and I'm going to draw a circle about that big around our subject because I want this image to feel very, very moody. So I'm going to change the effect to exposure and I'm going to pull this down by almost 2 stops, I think. Somewhere around maybe 1.8, something like that. So now we've got a much moodier shot where our subject is completely thrown into this kind of spotlight of sunlight and all other elements in the shot are kind of fading off into darkness. And this shot of our groom giving a speech is also a good example. What I would do here is I would probably pull down the exposure to around about a stop underexposed, and then I would take the brush tool and I'd put that to about a stop to bring it back up to the right exposure. I'd make sure the feathering was up pretty high, the flow is almost up fully, and I'm just going to paint in our groom here. Now you can spend a bit more time to get this done a bit more accurately, but I think that's fairly good. We turn that off and on. We've brought much more attention to the groom in the shot there, and it's not overly done, it's not overly processed. And that's the trick with this, not to make it look like you've done anything, but just to subtly draw your eye to a key aspect of the shot. Number 4, edit in 16-bit rather than 8-bit whenever you can, then convert back to 8-bit. Let me show you why. So I'm going to jump into Photoshop for this one. So this image here is a portrait I took and it's in 8-bit at the moment. We know that by this little 8 up here. 8-bit is what you normally use for uploading to the web, but it's what a lot of images are stored in. It's a sort of standard format. Basically 8-bit means you have 256 colours per channel, which is a lot of colours, but you can run into issues when editing. For example here, if I were to put a bit of a vignette on here to highlight her face, up the levels a little bit, and you can start to see some banding here. So I'm just going to add another levels adjustment layer just for the purposes of showing this on YouTube, because the compression doesn't really show this very well. So if we zoom into 100%, you should be able to see this banding very clearly. The reason this banding is here is because we've got an adjustment layer on top of an adjustment layer on top of an adjustment layer, which is something you may well do when editing a photo. But each time we have an adjustment layer, we're doing things like we're taking the range of colours from this whole 256 per channel here and crunching it down to this tiny little section of it, and then editing on top of that and then on top of that again. So by the time we've got to this stage, we've lost so much colour that we are getting bands of colour. So what we need to do is change it to 16-bit. And 16-bit, rather than having 256 colours per channel, has 65,536 colours per channel, which is a lot more. To change it to 16-bit, you go up to image and then mode, and then down here you see it's 8 bits per channel. Change it to 16 bits per channel and watch what happens. So now all that banding has gone and left a smooth transition of colour. But you don't want to save a 16-bit image because only a few applications will be able to read it, and you won't be able to save it as a JPEG or a whole host of other file types that don't support 16-bit. You want a final 8-bit image. So this is the clever part. The banding is only appearing because we're pushing and stretching the colours in an 8-bit image. 8-bit has enough colours to create a good quality final image, it's just the editing part that's the problem. So while still in 16-bit, we flatten the image and then we convert back to 8-bit, and it looks great. Now if we look at these images side by side, we can see the difference in result from what editing in 8-bit and editing in 16-bit produces, and these are both now 8-bit images. So hopefully you can see that, because YouTube compression isn't the best, but I highly recommend editing in 16-bit wherever you can. Number 5, level and straighten your photos. There will be occasions when you won't want that, maybe you want a more natural look. It all depends on the meaning and the context of your photograph. But if you're taking a shot of the horizon, you probably want it straight. If you're taking a geometric shot of a building or a wall, you want those right angles. You want those perfect horizontals and verticals. You can do this in Lightroom and in Photoshop and other editing programs. Let me take you through some images. So this can be something really quite simple, just like this shot of a beach here. If I hit my crop tool, we can see that the horizon isn't quite straight. If I hit my angle tool here and just draw a line along the horizon, the image just straightens up and it just adds that little level of detail, that little finesse that just makes it a better shot. Now with something like this shot, this was taken in a design studio and it was for a design magazine, and everything is meant to be very, very rigid, lots of horizontals and verticals. So what we've got here is we've got a bit of barrel distortion with the lens and just some slight angles changing very, very slightly. So what we want to do is just tighten all this up just a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to enable profile corrections on my lens, and that's just going to correct those distortions there. And in the transform section, I'm just going to click full here. There's enough information in this for it to work out all the horizontals and verticals. It just gives it that little bit of extra tweaking just so you've got these perfect right angles in there. And for this sort of shot, that is quite important. And lastly, and probably most importantly, make sure whenever you're editing, before you finalize anything, you take a break and you come back to your image. Go away and make a coffee, whatever, just as long as you take your eyes away from the screen for a while and come back. As soon as you do that, you will be able to see things you could not see when you were initially doing the editing. We all have a tendency, I think, to overdo things a little bit, because when you overdo editing, what you see when you look at the photograph is editing over what the content of the photograph is. And that may be your objective, and that's fine, but make sure that that is what you want people to take from the photograph. Often a subtler approach is better. So a massive thank you to everyone who supports this channel on Patreon. I really do appreciate it, and every little bit helps. You help keep this channel going. If you want to help, you can go to patreon.com/Jamie Windsor. And also a big thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. I took on a sponsorship with Squarespace because I've been using them for several years and I've got 3 sites with them. They're basically an all-in-one website building platform. You do it all through your browser. They've got a beautiful range of templates that look great, basically sort of straight out the box, but you can also customize them. You can even add a bit of CSS code in there if you want to tweak them a bit further, if you know a bit more. It's very easy to use. They've got 24/7 customer support. A lot of professional photographers use them, so I highly recommend them. If you want to try them out, you can go to their website and you can start a free trial. You don't need to put in any credit card information or anything. And if you like what you've got, then you can go to squarespace.com/Jamie Windsor to get 10% off on your first purchase.